So how many of you people came here today to this talk because you drew the short straw? Like your company sent you and you're like, man, these other talks look really interesting. And then there's this one about like prioritization. Ugh, God, I don't want to do that one. Then you like drew that straw and you're like, damn it. Nobody's going to admit to that? All right, that's cool. Hi, my name is Matt Barcombe. I work with a company called Le Dog. See, Le Dog. Lean Dog. We're out of Cleveland, Ohio, which is right across one of the lakes around here. We do product design, we do organization design, lean, agile, hoopla, whatever. This young lady here, Diane, Sage Equity, also known as the Agile Squirrel on the Twitters. She's going to be helping with some of the activities that we're going to go through today. We've got about 40-ish minutes of content. It'll be a little bit loaded towards the front, and then we'll kind of introduce the activity, the exercise that we'll kind of continue and go throughout the day. So my hope for you guys is that there'll be at least some little bits of usefulness that you'll be able to extract out of 90 minutes of your life, and maybe tee it up to take some of it back to your place of employ, if that's useful, and actually start using some of this stuff. I've actually used the activity, the stuff that we're going to do today, in many aspects of my life because I'm a dork that way. We used this technique, my wife and I used this technique to actually plan where we were going to live next. We chose Cleveland, so I don't know if that's a pro or a con. So we're looking at Bristol, UK, which was really, that was the second one. The cost of living in Bristol is a little bit higher than Cleveland. We were looking at the Pacific Northwest. I don't know how many of you guys know, you guys probably know where Olympia is. And there's a little town there called Aberdeen, old logging town, right? Okay. There were some other cool places, but we actually really like Cleveland. We used to live there a number of years ago. We moved back, so I don't know if that's anchoring you for or against me. All right, so I want to jump right in and key up some of these I think the most basic concepts, but I think everybody's got these. Who's involved? Well, quick show of hands. Who is responsible for some kind of like road mapping today, or PMO, or portfolio, or something like that? That's kind of, you're on the hook for inputs to that process. Okay. What about you have to give things like sizes, estimates for projects that you'll be doing in the upcoming year? More people. Sorta, kinda. What do you mean sorta, kinda? Like, yeah, I just kind of bullshit that, and you know, they always just cut 20% off whatever I tell them anyways. All right. I'm sure that doesn't happen very often up here in Canada. Everything's better here. So who's heard of relative importance? It's like picking your favorite child. Who's ever done like high, medium, low? Yeah, if you've done that, you've done relative importance. Who's ever been frustrated because you've got 5 highs of equal importance, but you've only got time to work on 1 or 2 of them? And you're like, I just want to work on the most important one. And they say, they're all important. So usually if we try to be sneaky with relative importance, the next thing that we try to do is get away from the words, and we use numbers because numbers are mathy. And so we go, well, we'll get rid of high, medium, low, and we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ha ha, they'll never see through this trick. I have 7 number 1s that I need you to get done by tomorrow. And you're like, that's just what you did with the highs. That's the same thing. Have you guys all seen that maybe once, or had a friend that experienced that maybe? All right. Who's ever been lucky enough to move from relative importance to a stack rank? Someone actually says those 4 number 1s you have are 1, 2, 3, 4. Who works in that way today? You work off a stack rank. So for those of you that have the stack rank, hold your hands up high, be proud. Now, keep your hand up if you know why they're in the order they're in. Really? How about the reverse? Keep your hand raised if you don't know why they're in that order. You just know what number 1 is. Okay, one brave individual. That's good. I actually see more stack ranks than I used to. Still not as much as I'd like to, but usually I still see them just kind of assigned. Like, here's the list, here's the order. Don't have questions, go back to your cube, do the work! Because they're all German when they do that, and that's a really bad German accent. How about when we know that we're stack ranking because of something like a value cost or benefit cost ratio? Anybody doing that at work right now? I see a couple heads nodding. Who's involved in creating the value prop for the value prop ratio, or I'm sorry, the value cost ratio or the benefit cost ratio? You're involved in understanding what the business needs are, how much ROI, customer benefit, whatever it is that you do. Who's involved in that? Okay. Who's involved in trying to guess how much it's going to cost or how long it's going to take? Kind of the cost side of the ratio. Really? So why are the rest of you here? Just that short straw thing. All right. I got a couple of warnings about this session. Ooh, I don't know. Not at all. I mean, it's nice though. I mean, rather, you never know. We could get crazy now with an easel. I'm going to say the B word a lot. Benefit. Okay, so I want to explain this really quick. I use the word benefit in the very economic sense of the term. Like, I actually used to call it utility, but that actually got more confusing because people were like, why are you talking about my electricity company and stuff like that? So I actually really like economics, and you'll kind of see that a lot. So when we talk about benefit, it's okay. If you want to think of benefit and value as generally interchangeable, that's okay. People with PhDs in economics would want to beat you about the head and neck area. But generally speaking, they're mostly interchangeable. When I tend to use the V word, especially with people like controllers or CFOs, they tend to think dollars, which is okay. It's just that a lot of times I think we prioritize based on fake dollars. Have you ever gotten that sense where like, well, customer satisfaction, 2 points more on our customer sat surveys is worth $3 million. And you know no one's done the math to prove that. Yeah, so that's when I call it fake bucks, right? So I like dollars and I like value and I like understanding all that, but I would rather actually make sure that when we get to measuring stuff that we measure at least the thing that's real. I'd love to get very close to dollars, but push towards the dollars, but if the dollars aren't real, back up one step to the thing that you're actually measuring. So if you haven't done the diligence, for example, to say that 1 point of increase in customer sat generates however much top or bottom line, then just maybe stick with the thing that you know how to quantify for right now. So also, there's going to be math. Sorry. If you want to bail now, it's no one's going to judge you. It's very simple math. I don't think it's much more complicated than division. So, all right. I did give that away with ratio there earlier, right? All right. All right, so why a decision-making framework? Why a prioritization framework? Does anybody think they do something like this today? You have a structure for making decisions? A couple people do. Who wishes they had one? Anybody wish they had a structure for why and how they make decisions? Is that why you're here? You're like, yes, please. All right, so here's what I see. I see a lot of decisions being made, and I'm very hopeful because I would like to think that companies that are still in existence generally are still in existence because they're making good decisions already. And I do see a lot of the companies that I work for or with, they're making generally good decisions. And there's usually something like the annual plan. Do you guys ever have something like the annual planning period, the annual budgeting period, something like that? And so what I see is they get all, a bunch of smart people into a room and they talk about all these great things and they make all these great decisions and they put things in order and prioritize and whatever else. But then inevitably, like Q3 or Q4 rolls around. And we forget the nice, calm conversation we had at the beginning of the year, and then it's all about like whose fiefdom is at risk, and who's screaming the loudest, and who's the squeakiest wheel, and maybe you guys have never seen that, in which case that's awesome, but I tend to see that a lot in large companies, even medium companies. So I would like to still think that good decisions are generally being made. It's just that I'm not always sure that we're making them as collaboratively and explicitly as we could. And then this whole remembering thing, like remembering why we made the decisions we made later. Not that that means that we can't change the decisions we made, but it's a lot easier to have a rational and more objective conversation about the decisions we made if we have some way of remembering why we made the decisions in the first place. Maybe those reasons are invalid, maybe they're not. But if we just yell and scream at each other, it just sort of turns into like kindergarten. Has anybody ever felt like they're working at a kindergarten? A couple people? All right. I also like this idea, and I told you I kind of like economics. I like the idea that when we're prioritizing, we're making economic trade-offs. Who's ever worked on a project and you start it and it seems like it makes sense to work on, and you work on it a little bit and it makes sense to work on, and then somewhere in the middle of the project somewhere, it feels like it might not make sense to work on anymore? Couple people, see some more heads nodding up and down. Who had the ability to stop working on the project because it didn't make sense to work on anymore? That's great. I see that not very commonly. Like this whole idea that there is a successful way to end a project early. That's usually how we fire project managers, right? Is like, oh, they didn't finish on time, on budget. Well, if we keep incenting people like on time, on budget, blindly finish to completion, of course we're going to just keep marching on because we have no mechanism for having a successful ending for something that doesn't make sense to keep going. But if we're going to ask this kind of continuance question, like should we keep working, there's a big related question to that, right? Which is, well, what should we do instead? Well, we have to have that. So we have to have a prioritization, and we have to be able to say, well, here's what's left to do. Here's how much we think it's going to cost to do, and here how much value or benefit is left if we finish doing it, right? And does that make sense versus the next most important thing that we have to do on our roadmap or our product backlog or whatever? I mean, this is, I think, a pretty fundamental concept to Agile in general, is understanding our options and being able to be fluid enough to make trade-offs. Last but not least, and I think this is a really undervalued reason for having a prioritization framework, is we can empower decision making. And I don't mean the people with V's and C's or D's in their title, who are the people who the company pays to make decisions. But how many of you guys make decisions? That's great. I'm really happy it's half of you. The rest of you, that's interesting. I think that a lot of times, especially in the creative economy and creative work and knowledge work, we're making really important decisions for the company as individual contributors, as designers, as programmers, as analysts, as testers, all these kinds of individual contributing roles. But how do we know that we're making the right decision? And this is another reason that a prioritization framework can help us, right? And sometimes even just a stack rank is good enough, but if we understand the reasons, because that's really what the decision-making framework is. It's sort of showing us the structure of the reasons that we're making decisions in the first place. So if everybody in the company or department or whatever team knows what that structure is, then when you get faced with a choice, you can at least understand the framework well enough to, in theory, make a trade-off. There's another concept that's really strongly aligned with this. Has anybody heard of the concept of strategy deployment? So there's a couple of really great books on there. Check out Art of Action if you're having trouble sleeping at night. It's by a military historian turned management consultant, because those two things go really well together. And basically he talks all about how the evolution of the Prussian army happened over time. But what's really interesting, right, is that I don't know how much you guys studied any of these tactics, and I haven't. It's just he talks about it in this book that I read that I kind of liked. That when people on the front lines could actually spool out wire, then it was a normal practice for the people on the front lines to keep radioing back and asking the command center, telling them what they saw and asking them what they should do. Does that sound like maybe where you've ever worked, ever? You always have to ask for permission. You never are quite sure when faced with a choice how to go. You're like that soccer goalie, like that the penalty kick's getting shot, and you just have to pick one way to jump. And yeah. Well, what's interesting is when we started fighting with tanks instead of just people walking, is tanks could move very fast compared to people just walking, right? And so tanks couldn't spool the wire out very easily. So tanks could actually extend, right, technologically. They could go faster. They could go past the communication boundary. They couldn't know. So they were getting trounced horribly until they figured out this idea called commander's intent, right? And so there's a whole lot of stuff in here that's a lot more related to strategy design and strategy deployment for whole organizations and steering them. But I think the concept is very important because either way, whether we're talking about strategy deployment or any other kind of prioritization framework, we're still wanting to just give people the mechanisms to make the decisions on their own. It doesn't necessarily mean that you never have to check or never have to question anything, but compared to a lot of places that I've seen, especially the larger the corporation, the less of this kind of strategic intent or prioritization framework I tend to see. There's definitely a correlation between size and age of company and how much structure there is in how we make decisions that makes it all the way down to individual contributors that are making kind of really important decisions on a day in and day out basis. So, are there any questions about this slide? Because if anybody wants to call kind of bullshit on any of these, we should stop because the rest of the entire talk is predicated on this. Nobody brave enough to? All right. That's good. Shut you down. Anyways. A couple two key concepts is I think it's really important to separate two key concerns. By the way, making meringue is very hard. It should be easy. It's like egg whites and sugar. Anyways, it's very difficult for me. One thing that I think is important to separate is understanding what the benefits are or what the value is for the things you could do, and separate that from knowing what the cost is. So do not go back and tell anybody at your company, Matt said understanding cost is not important. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that it's two different ways of thinking about the problem. Don't conflate those two concerns. Don't think about how long something's going to take or how much it's going to cost at the same time of understanding what's the value or what's the benefit of doing it. Consider them both, just separate the time that you do it. So think about all the value first, and then think about cost afterwards if it's still important. If you're wondering about order for this kind of work that we do, anything that's more R&D or development or pretty much anything that has to do with software product development at all, you should probably spend more time understanding your value model or your benefit model first, because cost, while important, is the easier thing of the two to control in our context. Most of our cost is salary. And if we think about it, we could just drip fund things if we think that way. Or we're buying capacity in terms of people in usually annual chunks. So unless we're hugely staffing up or laying off for whatever reason, either costs for buying the capacity are generally fixed, and we can choose to allocate that capacity however we want. But understanding the value model is usually a lot harder. One way of thinking about this, an interesting corollary, anybody here work like in pharma or something related like pharmaceutical development? Do you happen to know what the success rate is on researching new drugs to be produced? It's really low though, right? You know that. I've heard different things, but usually I hear something like it's at about 100 to 1. So for everything you research, you know like 99 things you're gonna fail. What would you feel like if you had to plan your software portfolio like that? Here's all these things we could start this year. We know most of them aren't going to make it. How many people are actually operating in that context? Like you start a whole bunch of things and finish nothing that you said you were going to do in the year. Anybody ever experienced that? Maybe at a couple jobs ago, not here with your colleagues and peers. So I think it's important that we spend more time understanding our value prop, understanding the benefits of why we're doing the work. Pharma does this really well. Pharma understands, well, if we do this kind of research, if we find this kind of drug, we understand what it could lead to if we achieve it. They actually have a slightly different cost model than we do, but in R&D, it's still probably better for them to understand their value model first. And they're able to do that, and they're in a much more pure R&D mode than we are, doing actual science, right? And so if you think about how uncertain they are, versus how uncertain we are, we have good planning models for how to understand this kind of prioritization and how to think about our value modeling first. So that's actually what we're going to drive through the rest of today. So the second big thing to concern, and I'm I would love feedback on this because I think this is an awful way to word this concept. But my criteria is it needs to fit in this box on a slide. So I think the best way to describe this is an example. We want to understand, or we want to separate understanding the general benefit or the general value that we're trying to obtain from the very specific options that we have to choose from. Has anybody ever bought a car? I didn't know, it's Toronto. I hear that cars are evil here. So who went and you started looking at lots of individual cars? And then that's how you picked the car you bought. That's very normal. Who sat down and started making a list of all the things that you're looking for in a car? And you weren't specifically thinking about any particular cars. You're like, it needs to get good gas mileage, probably 4-cylinder. I want to have 4 doors. I need a trunk. Like, who started listing the criteria they needed? If you think about that, that's sort of like the benefits, right? Here are the things, the value prop that I want to obtain from having a vehicle. And then you can use that list to then actually go evaluate all of the actual cars that you have. Does that kind of make sense? It's really important because very often when we prioritize projects at companies, we do the exact opposite. We ask people for what could we do? What are your project ideas? Or here are all the projects that we think we'd like to do this year. And we actually don't really talk much about why we're choosing to do projects in the first place. Is the goal of this year to just generate more revenue? Okay, that would be helpful if we knew, like then we would pick the most revenue generating projects, right? What if the goal this year is some blend of things though? Like we do want to increase revenue, but only in a certain region, but we also realize that we're struggling with customer satisfaction in another area. However, we know that we've just grown through acquisition, so we definitely have some efficiencies issues and possible redundancies in our entire org structure. And so we've got many projects and a lot of capacity, but if we don't understand what all of these benefits that we're trying to achieve by doing projects in the first place, if we just take the list and order it, I think we're coming up a little bit short. Has anybody ever explored the reasons behind the projects? A couple people have. Have you ever, once you've understood the reasons, you're like, well, how about this other thing that's not even on the list? Right, so this is another side benefit of understanding the decision-making framework. If we understand what we're trying to achieve, and then we can certainly take our current list of projects and evaluate it against that criteria, but it's kind of like, what's that name, Simon Sinek, get behind the why, or start with why, something like that. Understanding why we're trying to do these kinds of things in the first place, we might generate better ideas and alternate projects and things like that. More importantly, we might be able to, if we're packaging up our projects or our MVPs or our options in a more kind of agile, good product management fashion, and we're keeping things nice and tight, we can ask that question that should we keep working on this versus should we do the other thing instead? We can ask that question in a much more useful fashion if we understand these two things separately. All right. Any questions on those two things real quick? Pretty straightforward. You're like, I'm all gonna go buy a car now. It's great. I'm really curious if anybody, we can talk offline about this, but like all the things that went into my little list for like where we were gonna move to, it actually worked though, it picked, we're very happy. All right, so we're gonna go through something that I call benefit mapping. If you search for this term, I have no idea what you're gonna find, so keep safe search on. I made up this term. It's mind mapping and some Excel stuff. We don't have Excel, so I'm going to make you do math by hand, which sucks, I'm sorry, but not a whole lot of math. So what I think of as benefit mapping is it's a lightly structured technique that's both visual and collaborative. And it's we use it to kind of create a value-based decision-making framework, which is kind of the entire pitch of the talk. And you can use it for, I've used it for prioritizing features and products, for projects in departments, for initiatives for whole companies. So it kind of scale. I mean, obviously we use it for picking a location to live. I've seen people use something like this to pick colleges with their college-age children. I've seen people use this type of technique for deciding what their next vehicle should be. So it's literally a simple structure that allows people to collaborate on understanding why and how they're going to make decisions. All right. Y'all ready to go? I'm going to ask you to draw. first. So this is an example. This is for a product. So it was a company that had a product called Galaxy. Galaxy was sort of their code name. They were an educational company. Anybody ever use something like online Blackboard or any of those online school systems? It was something like that. It kind of doesn't matter. And so they were looking at adding different options to their product, their educational utility. The reason I like mind maps is anybody who's never used mind mapping? Anybody never used mind maps? So it's just sort of a way of visually creating an outline. So you have a parent node, in this case it's the product, and we'll create some children nodes. And all it is you can almost imagine it's a more visual way of creating an outline. I use this for writing blogs. I've used this for writing presentations. I've used mind mapping for all sorts of things, creating test plans, product designs. I find them to be very useful. They're a very typical brainstorming tool. So there are major areas that they were looking for benefit, as you can see. So you can imagine they're a company, so one of the things they cared about was making money. That seems legit for a company to make money. A lot of these are pretty normal. They wanted their customers to be happier. They wanted to increase the awareness of their product. They actually felt very strongly that just the more people just knew that their product even existed, that I think they felt that the market was very narrow. There weren't a lot of options, and so if you didn't even know that another option was out there, that you wouldn't get ahead. And they actually found that they're to get into educational institutions that it's very sticky. So once you get in, you're kind of good, because it's very hard, I guess, for educational institutions to remake decisions and then choose to get rid of old IT systems and put new IT systems back into place. So one of the things they really cared about was any features that would make their product just more likely to actually become adopted and stay adopted. You'll notice that we kind of keep going out, and so we keep getting subdividing, children of children of children of children. And so you can kind of, if you're facilitating this, you can say, well, what is it about customer sat that you really like? Do you just want to make people happier because happy? Is that it? That's not bad, but they actually had a little bit of tying back to, well, if their customers were more satisfied, I guess that there were a lot of adjuncts instructors that worked in the kind of schools that use their tools. And I don't know how much you guys know about adjunct instructors, but a lot of times they have more than one job. Sometimes that other job is actually at a different school. So they actually found that if they were keeping their users happy, both students as well as the teachers that had to use the tool, they would wind up just speaking about it, and it actually made their sales reach a little bit broader, because ultimately when people were talking about what type of software to move to or pros and cons of their current package, it was these people that they turned to. Product awareness, they specifically said, well, there's lots of ways of being aware of the product, but they really wanted brand awareness. They wanted people to recognize their logo and their name and just be thought of as generally well-to-do in this industry, in this space. And when we asked, well, why is that kind of a benefit for you? Well, ultimately, they can decrease their marketing costs. If it's you guys probably know brands like this right now. Has anybody ever said, hey, could you hand me a Kleenex? Right. It's actually a facial tissue, right? But no one says, please hand me a facial tissue. Anyways, so the idea, and this was not the whole map. I had to fit it on a slide. This map was very big. And when you're facilitating this, you always want to ask more detailed questions. And when I have you guys go through this, I'm going to keep pushing. As we mill around and help you with filling this stuff out, I want you to go as granular as possible, because what we really want to do here is be as intentional and as specific as possible while we're brainstorming the kinds of value we might get from projects or initiatives. Now, we're not going to use all of it, for sure, but it's really important to explore the depths, like what do these things mean? What do you mean by customer sat? Why do we value? And you're going to sound like a broken record or a 5-year-old, just keep asking why, but it's important when you're facilitating these things that we really get granular about what we mean when we say this and why we even care about it as a benefit for doing projects. Does this kind of make sense so far? Any questions about this? You can imagine other ways of splitting. It would be like, well, do we care about customer satisfaction in all our regions, in all of our geographies? Do we care about them by all of our customer segments? Do we care about them by all sizes of, in this case, schools that we sell to? So we can ask all of these things, all these clarifying questions. You also might, is anybody surprised at why I don't know, like why does one node fall under a certain parent instead of a different one? Because some of these look to me like maybe they could have been in different branches. So ultimately, as the facilitator, I don't care. I will ask the question if it seems weird to me, but ultimately it's their product, it's their decision making. I might ask something like, well, don't we want to increase our competitiveness and that also helps our sales reach? That seems like a fair question to ask, right? And so then I like to help people, facilitate this so we're stretching these things apart. So what is it about competitiveness that's important, that's agnostic of sales reach? So we always want to help tease these things apart when we're not sure about what the overlaps are. Any questions so far? So like I said, we're not going to use all of these, so we do brainstorm and mind map as much as we can. And I don't know how to explain it right now better than if you're actually facilitating this and the map's getting big. You can usually tell by how engaged the people are that you're facilitating for. If they're really just getting into nuance and subtlety that you think isn't really any kind of key decision-making or driver for how they're choosing projects, you can be like, okay guys, time out, and either move them on to a different branch or a different parent or just move on to the next phase of benefit mapping. So the next phase is actually picking. I actually usually start with my top 3. So I ask people, okay, out of all this mind map stuff, what do you think are your top 3 drivers for why you'll actually pick projects? And when you're facilitating this, you want to push as far down the tree as possible. You want to get as detailed and explicit as possible because that's going to be the most explicit thing we can do. And if people are really like hemming and hawing between maybe 2 different children of a parent and they really can't make up their mind, then maybe that's the right indicator that you should just go up to the parent node, and that's fine too. So I usually like to say top 3, and usually whether they pick top 3 and then order them or order them as they go, I don't really care. But the reason I like to start with 3 is because inevitably what happens is 3 is generally not enough. I have seen cases where 3 was too much. Actually, they're like, well, there's only 2 things we care about this year. It's making money and cutting heads. Well, all right, that's pretty straightforward then. But usually 3 is not enough. So when we get to this and we get to 3, and you can see, because people will be arguing between what's more important for their third thing, is this one or this one. And then you can ask them, well, what if I gave you a 4th? If I gave you a 4th, what would you pick? And then they go, oh, clearly this one. Okay, great. So if it was clearly that one, is that clearly the 4th, or can we put them in an order between 3 and 4? And again, the same thing happens. If they are like hemming and hawing, like if they said, well, if I had a 4th, it would be this one. No, this one, this one, this one. If they're arguing about that, you ask them to pick one. You say, well, what if I gave you a 5th? And you can kind of keep going down that path. There's a little bit of black magic in there to figure out when you should stop. I would say never, ever go past 7, even on a really, really large map. But if you think about it, 7 things divided equally, you get too much past 7, and we're not really establishing key drivers anymore. We're usually just trying to appease somebody. I've only, I think, used 7 once or twice ever. I usually cap out around 5. And the reason you can do that is, again, if they're really getting back and forth on low-level stuff, it might be the right approach to back them up 1 node. Instead of adding a 7th decision-making thing, we can just take them up to a 6th that actually combines 2 interests. Does this kind of make sense? All right. All right. Give some type of expiration context. It is very normal for places that aren't doing anything like this at all that quarterly is not a bad place to start. Just reevaluate your map every 3 months. If your industry and market and technology and all that competitiveness, if that moves very quickly, reevaluate this more often. If you're in a very big, deep-pocketed company in a very protected industry and innovation is very slow-moving, do it less than 3 months. I've definitely seen places evaluate this monthly. I've definitely had clients that evaluate this every year along with their annual budgeting cycle. I don't think there's a right or wrong. Pick a place and go from there. Does anybody do anything like this, by the way, with their current company, where they're at, or maybe you've done it at a place in the past? A little bit? Most people don't, it looks like. So what I usually find, like I said, is normally I think this conversation is happening. What I don't usually find is that it's happening in a collaborative visual way. like that there's somebody that's actually mapping this out on a whiteboard or on a big piece of paper in a table. Like usually people are saying these things and agreeing on them, but again, they don't create the artifact that they remember, and they're not using a facilitative structure that actually encourages them to co-create something together. A lot of times what I see is like, 3 or 4, high-level people go off into a room, they come up with their own little list, and then they come back and try to beat each other up about why theirs is better than the other person's. So I don't know, it's probably a little cynical. But, that's just the nature of the work that I do, I guess. It's okay, they're asking for help. So the people that I work with, they're coming to church. It's cool. No? Too much? All right, so we're gonna start with an activity, and we're actually gonna just keep building on this. We're basically gonna go through the entire process of building a benefits map. There's more than just the mind map, because otherwise, we wouldn't have 90 minutes. I'm not sure we have 90 minutes, but lunch early, yay. So, of course, anybody ever facilitate a workshop publicly at a conference or something like that? So, one of the hardest things to do is figure out what your guys' shared context is gonna be, because I'm guessing all of you at a table don't work for the same company. Is that a good assumption so far? All right. So I'm going to provide you one, and hopefully it's meaningful. If you want to work on something else, I really don't care. But here's a context for today. I want you guys to all pretend that you guys at your table, that you're part of the planning event, or the planning committee for this event, for Agile Toronto, and we'll call it 2017. You guys are all going to help co-create this event next year. And one of the goals that you guys are going to be, maybe you're like the subcommittee for trying to help make networking for the event better. Now there's a very small word in here that I think has a little bit of subtlety, and I want you to think about it. I said improve the networking for the event, not improve the networking at the event. High fives? And by the way, I am not trying to say, Artie, that the networking is bad. I just needed a context, and you can actually blame Mike Bowler for the idea. So I actually really like the idea, because you should have seen the awful thing I was going to have you do before this. So improve the networking for the event. And I think for means something a little bit different than at, but ultimately that is going to be your guys' table to figure out what that means, not my job. I do want you, while you're kind of going through this, to consider the needs and the goals of all of the contributors and the participants. So attendees are participants, speakers are participants, keynote's a kind of speaker. The people that give us money, what do we call those people? Sponsors, they're participants. Volunteers are participants. The actual planners, you guys, would be participants. So everybody, every human that is involved in this event somehow, what are their goals and needs for networking in general? So that should be a lot. There should be a lot here. Last but not least, and I know that maybe none of you guys are professional event planners, but I feel this is an important thing to constrain, because if I just said, don't worry about money, sky's the limit, we're all going to be like riding rockets to the moon for Agile Toronto's after event party or something. And while that would be awesome, don't think we can do that. So I'm just kind of going to give you a little bit of constraint around don't be afraid to spend, but do remain budget conscious. We will eventually ask you to cost some of these things out roughly, but remember, we're making a benefits map. So we're not making a cost map. So when we talk about all of the things that we are looking for in that car or that college, when we want to consider, you guys all remember I said consider benefit and cost separately? So in the benefit map, we're only talking about the benefit. So be cost conscious, and that's only meant to constrain you into thinking about plausible scenarios for an event this size, right? But we're not asking you to come up with any kind of cost evaluations right now. And in fact, anything that you consider like a cost to doing a thing or a risk of doing a thing, while it will be part of the decision, is not part of the activity right now. Are we cool with that? All right. I can come back to this later if we want to. So here's the first thing that I'm going to have you guys actually do at your tables. There were definitely fuzzy words in that statement. So as a table, I want you to ask questions around the fuzzy words. Who can remember what one of the fuzzy words was? What? Better, yeah. Any word like that. Are you a tester by any chance? I love those questions. Improve networking? What does improve even mean? Wonderful question. I have no idea. Y'all need to figure that out. You're only going to be considering the beneficial results or the outcomes. So yeah, we're going to have to figure out what better means. Yeah, we're going to have to figure out what improve means. If you're going to get super myopic, you might even have to define what networking means. And then you're going to only consider the benefits. So again, not the costs. Then you're going to make a mind map. It's going to look a lot like all those circles with lines connected to them that I just showed you. And you remember how I had kind of like a couple of tiers out, 2 or 3 tiers out, so we had children of children of children. So you can consider your top level node, it can just be like networking at Agile Toronto, and then think about all the different ways, all the different groups, all the different things that we might get to generate benefit, and try to come up with 3 tiers. So you're going to come up with subdivisions and subsegments, and that's a good thing. So definitely mind map a little bit deep. Don't come with just one full circle pass. So are we good at least right now? And I will mill around and help tables, and so will Diane. Are we ready to get started? All right, let's go. Who thought this was going to be kind of easy before? Let me rephrase it. Who found this to be harder once you actually started doing the mind map? You thought it was going to be easier, and then you started, and you're like, holy crap. Yeah. Who felt that this was more constrained than the example that I walked you through with the product? Anybody feel that this was a more constrained example? You guys did? Anybody, so everyone else thought it was a less constrained example? You had more freedom with this? Half you guys are like, we don't care, just keep moving. All right, we'll keep moving. All right, did that. All right, so now I'm going to time box this crisp because I don't want you spending a ton of time worrying about what's right or wrong here, but out of the mind map that you've created, if it's small, some of you guys have a smaller map, only pick 2 things. So if you've only got like, say, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 nodes, only pick 2 things. If you've got something more than 6 or 8 nodes, go ahead and try to pick 4 things. I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes to pick these. So go ahead and pick them and rank them. I'm really curious. Did anybody have the inclination to say, who does number 2 work for? Any Austin Power fans? Who thought this was harder than they thought it would be? Who just did dot voting? All right, yeah, I don't think that's a bad technique. Really, it's whatever kind of works. In terms of facilitation of this part, it can get a little hairy. So depending on the egos and the personalities in the room, if you're doing this at your company, sometimes something like dot voting is easy because then we don't got to hear everybody, right? You can do a little fist of 5, right? You can do that. You can kind of do close to the chest Roman voting. Who thinks this is number 1, right? I definitely think that. I don't care. It's definitely not number 1. You can do that. So whatever good facilitatory, stupid human tricks you guys know to help kind of defuse potentially ego-driven situations is great. I try to start more collaborative, like just kind of shout things out, agree, and sometimes in this, usually the further up the executive food chain we go, the more I have to dither that out a little bit. Not always the case. All right, so we've got our mind map, and we've got our what we're going to call kind of our key drivers. So far, so good. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to add weights to those. So the reason I try to take it easy with you when we're starting the math now, why I wanted you to pick 2 or 4 is because I didn't want you to divide by 3. So the way this worked, there's a big podium right there. We picked our top 4 drivers here. And then what we want to do is just assign a weight. So the way weights work is they do need to add to 100. So I am asking you to do a little bit of addition. The easy way to do this in terms of like the stupid human trick that I found to be the most useful when facilitating this is divide them evenly, right? So you have a 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have a rank of our 4 most important things. So if you rank them, and the first thing you do is give each one of them, say 25%. Now my rule is you're only allowed to move percentage points around in 5-point chunks, buckets. Because if we are arguing over it's 1 or 2 or 3, we're really just, again, trying to probably appease a big personality in the room. So the first thing I like to do is make them all equal, but we rank them so we should know that they're not. So in order to kind of prime the pump, the first thing that I like to do is take 5 from my least important thing and add it to my most important thing. If people get stuck in terms of just, great, now which should be moved next, always think about if everything is totaling 100 and you think things are wrong, always start with a subtraction problem. Where should we take 5 away from? And you can almost think of it as like, we're going to take 5 and take it out. Great. Where would we like to reallocate 5? What seems like it's too high? They could all be equal. There's no wrong way to do this unless they don't add up to 100. That's the wrong way. But I've seen people do that. As you start going through what your weights are, I've actually seen people change what their rank was. That's totally fine too. The weights are going to be wind up the math that matters. So this should be pretty time boxable for this group too, for this activity. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to come up with your weights for your key drivers. So go ahead and get started. Who had problems adding to 100? Did anybody put weights on their things and you added up and you're like, dang, this is 110% of my decision? All right, harder or easier than the last step? Easier? All right, was it easier because you ranked them first, probably? All right, so to kind of keep that in mind, if you go and you try to facilitate this at your organization, that initial ranking is helpful, but remember, the math is going to be based off these percentages, so the ranking is literally just to prime the pump on the conversations that your group or your team is going to have about in what order, because we're going to want to get to this weights thing. Again, I've actually seen more and more places using some type of weighted framework to make decisions. I don't think this is really brain buster. In fact, I think I originally saw this in like Biz Stats 101, like back in the day. What I really think tends to be missing is that we don't tend to have these conversations collaboratively with the group of decision makers that are like responsible for the portfolio or the roadmap. And we generally are doing it at this level, not in the context of this mind map that we just co-generated together. So keep in mind, I don't think any one of these pieces or steps is like super novel, but I do think they tend to work together to create this neat little collaborative visual system. All right, this is the hard one, and so work on one of these, but I might have to time box you and just stop before you can get to all of these. So this has just created a weighted framework, a weighted scoring framework. Anybody ever been a teacher that had to grade essays? This is where I first learned about rubrics, and I was very confused because I thought it was like a Rubric's cube, but that's not. It's a Rubik's cube. This is a different thing. So what a rubric is, at least when I was grading essays, is I had to come up with reasons as to why an A was an A. If you're grading something as subjective as an essay, you're reading a student's essay and you're saying that feels like an A and this feels like a B. You actually had to codify, you had to state in words in some type of at least quasi-objective manner as to defensively why an A was an A. Because what do all students do when they get not an A? They complain and they blame you because you're an awful bad teacher, which is probably true for me, but it helped. So we will want to just wind up scoring our projects and ideas on a 1 low, 5 high scoring mechanism. And I've seen places that do that. What I see most places don't do is turn the 1 to 5 into an actual rubric. If you're going to tell me that 1 is low for product adoption, that's fine. What does low on product adoption mean? In this case, what they said is it means that the product might get adopted in less than 10% of the region. So we've got something that's a little bit more objective, a little bit more. It doesn't have to be objective, but it does need to be, I like to think of it as plausibly quantifiable. Try to get as close to dollars as possible, because I think that makes you keep asking yourself, but how do we know, and some type of truly measurable thing, like why do we even care that the product's been adopted in this much of the region? How do we know if that adoption has happened? Sometimes we'll get to things like counts or ranges or trends or things like that, and that's totally fine. We want to stay real. We don't want to trade off for objectivity, but then go down that path of like fake dollars where we haven't done the appropriate level of diligence to map it back to actual dollars. So talk about dollars if that makes sense when you're working with your company, but definitely get to the thing that you think you can measure with some level of certainty. Any question about the rubric bit? When you're doing this with groups of people, especially at work, this is the hardest part. Probably second to the mind map. The mind map takes a long time, but usually it's pretty frictionless because you can just write whatever you want. We actually have to agree on numbersy things for the rubric. So here's the activity. So you've already done this. Basically, you've listed your key drivers in an order left to right. You've assigned equal weights, and you've moved things around. Sorry, I left it on the wrong slide. You did all that. So for each weighted driver, so you guys all have your drivers, you all have weights. First, the first thing you have to do for each of these in terms of determining a rubric is come up with your unit that you think you're going to measure. Is it going to be a count of things? Is it going to be dollars of things? Is it going to be a range of things? Is it going to be points on a survey? What is it going to be? How will you measure? And the first thing of knowing how you're going to measure is what you're going to measure. So that's determining your unit. The easiest thing to do is, people get really sometimes kind of like really opinionated about the 5-point scale. I actually don't give a crap about how many points your scale is. I find 5 to be useful because it's more than 3. If you like more than 5, use your own scale. My only suggestion is that when you're figuring out your scale, start with the endpoints first. Start with what 1 means as low and what 5 means as high, and it should be a linear scale. So in theory, it's nice just straight division between 1 and 5 to figure out what 2, 3, and 4 are. Does that sound fair? All right. We're gonna keep this one kind of. Yeah. We got like let's do 5 to 7 minutes on this one. All right, who's got a scale for at least one thing? Does everybody have a scale for at least one? All right, I'm going to push along real quick. All right, time out, guys. So for what I'm going to have you guys do, because you haven't finished your scale necessarily for all of your key drivers, we're going to go into actually evaluating projects next. That's totally cool. Go ahead and just do the math with 1 low, 5 high, even if you don't have your scale across all of them. So a couple of things to point out, kind of some takeaways about the scale business. One is, if your units are vastly different, or even the quantities for the units are vastly different. So if you've got something like, we've got cost savings projects, but they save us thousands of dollars, and then we've got revenue generating projects, and they make us like millions of dollars, that's actually a point of reflection to come back to them as key drivers. Right? Instead of trying to say what's 1 low, 5 high for cost saving, if cost savings initiatives are vastly different quantifiably from revenue gen, if the only benefit is the dollars of the cost savings, maybe they're not actually as influential as we think they should be. And if you start asking yourself that question, that just doesn't feel right, you're like, no, but it's not just about the money. Great, then that's the driver, and we need to go back to our map and identify what those things are or name those benefits more explicitly. Does that make sense? Sometimes cost savings initiatives aren't just about the tactical Benjamins. Maybe they're about making sure that we can scale for the future, or that we're going to be optimized for an upcoming acquisition, and there's more benefit to hang on to it than just the simple dollars of something like cost savings. Does that make sense? The table in the back had another interesting thing too. If the units are very different, or if there's a slightly different scale but vastly different, you might want to consider things like percentage increases over time, because that's going to normalize things across. That's totally fine. Ultimately, between the fact that we're scoring these on a 5-point scale, and that we've weighted them, and a little bit about how we're going to talk about choosing to start stuff maybe at the end, it shouldn't matter a ton, because we're trying to just make a decision-making framework, not an actual, like, true ROI calculation at this point. Does that make sense so far? The other thing that I always get asked, and I always forget to say this because it seems super obvious to me, is I'm asking you to make a 5-point scale. Technically, it's a 6-point scale because 0 comes before 1, and it means nothing. I did this for a client, and I showed them how to do this. We got started, and they evaluated all their projects. I came back a couple weeks later, and they're like, yeah, but some of these projects like literally gave us no benefit for this key driver, so we scored it a 1. Like, but 1's bigger than nothing, so nothing is an option. So you can have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Last but not least, we're going to actually score the projects across these things. So the way I had 2 projects for this product that they were looking at, 2 features, 2 MVPs. And the way the math of this kind of works is, so for this feature, this new catalog feature that they wanted to add to Product Galaxy, we take 4 times 45 plus 2 times 30 plus 1 times 15 plus 3 times 10, and that gives us a total score of 285. By itself, it doesn't tell us a whole lot. If we do a theoretical max of 500, we know that we're past the middle mark of 250. But really what we want to do is use this to compare other projects to each other. So at this point, what we're doing is using a mildly quantifiably informed way of comparing the benefit only. So one way of thinking about it is if these 2 projects cost the same or took the same amount of time, we should definitely do the grades portal because 295 is more than 285. Is anybody doing WSFJ with SAFE? No? Good. Then don't do that. Just use this. Because this is better for reasons over beer. All right. Here's the deal about cost. So I left it to last on purpose because I said it's the least interesting thing to worry about, but it is something that we need to worry about. If you think this won't work in your company, let me know why, and we'll talk about how I've done it. So A, use past data. All of your teams and all of your projects are more alike than you think. They're not all special snowflakes, and our goal is to reduce uncertainty, not create accuracy with costs. When people say, but comparing a larger team that's working on Java to a smaller team that's working on Ruby is like comparing apples to oranges. I'm like, that's great. That's a ton of information. Apples and oranges are about the same size. They're both fruit. They both have seeds. We actually know a lot. If I said, hey, here's an apple, and you're like, what's an apple going to be like? I'm like, it's like an orange. And then I showed up with an elephant. You'd be like, what the hell is that? I expected nothing like that. You said it was like an apple. Does this sound fair? So we actually know a lot about past data. Even if we think they're not exactly the same or comparable, we know enough to do what we need to do with costs assessment, which is just know enough. All right, you have an informed conversation. So get those people, the programmers, the testers, the analysts, the project managers. You don't need to get everybody from every team. This doesn't have to be a big, giant meeting, but find the right roles to come and have a quick, informed conversation about, hey, we've got these kinds of projects, these kinds of options or MVPs. How do they compare to some of the things we've done in the past? And then do a rough cost snapping. So this means come up with a costing scale. I like to use the Fibonacci sequence because, well, for no good reason, actually. I like them because you get to say fib, which means lie, and they're derived from ecology, which has nothing to do with computer science. So that does mean you don't have to use them for your user stories. But I like them because there is a scale there. I also like things like 1, 3, 6, 9, 12. I also like even numbers. I also like odd numbers. I kind of don't care. As long as you pick some scale. My favorite unit for assessing cost is team months. There are a whole lot of reasons that is a bad unit to use if we're trying to get accurate cost estimates. It is a great unit to use for a cost snapping on some predetermined scale to choose. Just learn enough about costs to start. So I have one slide on figuring out cost. I have loads and loads of slides about how to collaboratively determine benefit and value. I would suggest you count the number of slides, and you put in about the same amount of effort into the 2 activities. So learn just enough to choose to start. So if anybody says, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, it's usually because they're trying to do something more than that. All right, last activity, we're going to kind of wrap. I need you guys to discuss a few plausible ideas. With the amount of time we have left, I think probably 2, because you need 2 to be able to compare. So what are 2 plausible ideas to try to improve the networking at this event next year? Go ahead and write them down, and then we're going to evaluate them to do a benefit cost scenario. So once you have your 2 ideas, you're going to use the thing that you just made, the little weighted scoring rubric, And you're going to score each idea across each of your key drivers, saying whether you think it's low, 1, or 5, high for that driver. And you're going to do that for each of the key drivers, and then you're going to do that in math. And you're going to come up with a score. So you'll come up with the benefit score, figure your cost snapping scale. You can do 1, 2, 3, low, medium, high. It sort of doesn't matter. And then go ahead and rank those two ideas against each other by a benefit to cost ratio. So you're going to take that benefit score and you're going to divide it by whatever your cost unit is, and you will have a ratio because that's how division works. Any questions about this? This is the most mathy. I will walk around and help with math. Yes?
Just maybe a subtle thing, but you change the word for to an at.
Where? Oh, snap. Good call. Bad me. That was at 6 o'clock this morning.
Okay.
All right. Do you want me to put this back up? Because that might help you the most with the math. All right.
Recommendation.
All right, folks, I'm going to call timeout real quick. You don't have to stop, but I do want you to just take a quick break. It's 12:15, so technically we're at lunch. Okay, y'all didn't just flee. So here's the deal. A couple quick things about this. Let me wrap. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so think about some of the things that you discussed. Like, why did you discuss them? How did you discuss them? How did your group make choices? These are all big things for you to take away about how you might do this at work. How is this different from how you do this kind of decision making at work? And then what aspects do you think you could apply soon? I usually would have liked people to kind of shout out and share some of these, but I would really like, you don't even have to do all of this, but there's definitely 3 or 4 major pieces of this activity that you might be able to apply a little bit more quickly than other ones. One other quick thing, when it comes to this, when you think about the 3 main pieces, we've got the map, the weights, and the rubric. One person asked, well, when we have multiple product owners, we see that people kind of want to game it to get their stuff towards the top. I actually invite that as a point for conversation. There's only 3 things we can change to change the order of that list. We've either misidentified some piece of the mind map, we've either weighed it incorrectly, or our scoring rubric is wrong or needs to be changed. So the cool thing is if someone says, well, I think these 3 projects should be at the top, great. Let's then change the model to figure out how it would have to look different to actually bump those things to the top. Now, ultimately, if people are just going to get in little fiefdom wars, then you have to pull up, whoever's boss. You have to do to kind of say, come on, guys, we ultimately need to do what's best for the organization. But it is still a visual and collaborative mechanism. So if we want to change the order of projects, there are only 3 main areas where we can do that. And that's a really useful tool to invite conversation. I saw a number of people coming up to take pictures of various slides. So if you guys want to keep working over lunch or come back, I'll hang out for a while. If you want the slides or you have questions, come up and talk to me while I'm breaking down. Or feel free to email me at matt.barkham@leandog.com. I'm kind of everywhere on the internet, LinkedIn, Twitter, easily stalkable by design. So thank you guys for your participation. You guys have been a great group.